Now, we have a couple of roving microphones and we have some time for questions or comments. I'd ask you to keep them brief. Put up your hand if you've got a comment. Yes, we have one right here in the front.
Thanks very much for these excellent presentations. No one's yet mentioned population growth, and surely slowing the rate of population growth or stopping it would be an important contribution to addressing these issues.
Okay, thank you. I knew that would be the first question. It was on my list of first questions to ask as well. So thank you for asking that question.
Go on, Tom.
Well, I agree with you. And the demographic dimensions of Black Saturday, for example, are absolutely crucial, aren't they? That one of the ways in which Black Saturday was a very different fire to Black Friday related to the size and distribution of the Victorian population. Of course, in 1939, that came at the end of a period of intensive sawmilling, with many small sawmill settlements established right in the heart of the forests. And one of Judge Stretton's recommendations was to remove those sawmills from the forests where they were so much in peril in summer, and to move them out to the towns. But of course, with 1983 and even more so with 2009, we have fires that in some ways repeat the patterns of 1939, but have an even more dangerous new dimension, and that comes from the sprawling city and that deadly integration of the suburbs and the forests, and something that brings people who are understandably unaware of their environment in some cases right into the heart of the most dangerous fire region on the planet. So the demographic dimensions, thank you, I think are absolutely crucial. We have an expanding city, we have an environment where people want to live and embed themselves in it. We have suburbs in perilous natural situations, and so it's part of the chemistry that created Black Saturday.
But you're saying, Tom, that that's about population in that region. I mean, the question is clearly about the population of Australia as a whole.
And Michael's avoiding answering it by putting it back to you.
Yes, and also it's not my role to answer the questions, is it? It's your role to ask the questions.
That's right, no, but I mean, I think that the point Michael's making is right here, that the question I think you're posing is one of the overall numbers. And if we look at water supply, I mean, we had Melbourne 2030, as we all know, which was meant to define the boundaries of the city with a couple of growth corridors and maintain the green spaces and some of that biodiversity we've talked about. Melbourne 2030 is dead. We now have Melbourne at 5 million, which is planning for Melbourne as a city of 5 million people. And we have an economy which is built on a model of migration and growth. So do any of you want to comment on that side of the
Absolutely.
equation?
Well, in terms of water resource planning, I did allude to, I said increasing population, so it's kind of along the lines, is a key component of demand projections for how much water we'll need. So in terms of our increasing population and climate change, our demand for water is going to continue to rise. And the point about long-term planning is to make the most efficient use of the water resources available to us, rather than just importing more and more into the system via desalination, which is going to generate more greenhouse gas emissions. The point that we're making with long-term planning and factoring in population growth into that is to where do we need it and what's available there, and how do we actually use what we've got more efficiently rather than just importing more water into the system.
Any more comments on the population question?
Well, in Victoria, we have straight line growth since the Second World War. It just goes straight up. I can't see that any policy is going to stop that. Policies of population growth of the kind they have in China tend to be pretty unpleasant. I think that we should plan for population growth myself. I think it'd be good if we had a bigger population, actually. You know, Australia's the driest continent on Earth, but we have more water per head of population than any other developed country. We have a crisis because we don't yet know how to live in this country, and we don't know how to use the water effectively. But we have more water per head than any other developed country. So there's a message there about how we use water. I think the population debate can wait a bit, because whether we like it or not, those populations are coming.
Another question down. Yeah, okay, yep.
Hello. I just wanted to disagree with the last presenter saying that it's an individual responsibility as opposed to government responsibility. I didn't actually hear it said that if logging in our water catchments was stopped, which is very much responsibility of the government, we could actually be saving up to 50% water. So we would have 50% more water if the government stopped logging. And if the government stopped logging in the Thompson catchment alone, Melbourne's main water resource, we'd have 20 billion litres of water each year additional. I also wanted to mention that just recently there was a report on the bushfires of this year, and the main attributes for actually stopping a bushfire was to maintain our old-growth forests and rainforests, because they're wet forests and they slow down and reduce forests, and so the areas that had been cleared or were disturbed by human activity were most vulnerable to fires. And so governments putting fire breaks around rainforests is very dangerous.
Okay, we'll get a few responses. I think that Marnie's point about individual responsibility was actually influencing governments to do things differently. That was the point she was making. But I think the logging in catchments is an area that probably both Tom and Michael, or maybe all of you, have a comment to make about.
Well, certainly a good question for bringing together fire and water, isn't it? Because I agree with Michael's presentation where he championed Melbourne's closed catchment system. I think it is something we should be enormously proud of. I also enjoyed Michael's mantra of dates. I think, 1927 Maroondah going through to 1983 Thompson, and we can put that alongside the mantra of bushfire dates, 1919, 26, 32, 83, 2009, 39. Did I miss it? But your question goes to the heart of how we manage those closed catchments and how valuable is the forest in those catchments for its own natural values, but also for the way in which it retains and maximises the volume and purity of the water in the catchment. And I think that's a part of the pride in the catchment should be a pride in those forests.
Oh, here.
Okay. Another question down the front here. Yep.
Yes, Marnie, you said that 61% of our water is domestic use, and if our household is typical, most of that's used in the bathroom by standing under a running tap to clean ourselves and by flushing toilets. Are there engineering solutions that you have in mind to resolve those issues?
There are, and it comes down to a level of comfort in what you would use recycled water for. I have debates with fellow colleagues in the water industry who work in the potable side who said I'd never wash my clothes in recycled water. I've been involved in the development of recycled water, and I'm quite comfortable with using recycled water in a washing machine, in a toilet. I wouldn't put recycled water anywhere in your kitchen, but running it through laundry and toilet facilities does not bother me in the slightest.
Not even if it was the highest quality recycled water, the Singapore-style recycling, you can't see a system for recycling potable water as was proposed for Toowoomba?
I think, it's a interesting debate, and I don't think we're there yet. And I think that the can of worms it opens when you start talking about putting recycled water into the potable system is, why do we have closed catchments? If the closed catchments are about protecting what is a pristine water supply system, what is the point of having them if you introduce recycled water?
I grew up in Adelaide, which is dependent on the Murray.
Absolutely.
And as a former Environment Minister, now Leader of the Opposition, once said to me, the water in the Murray has been through many a kidney before it gets to Adelaide.
Absolutely. And look, we might find ourselves in 50 years' time that there is no other options short of building a fleet of desalination plants. But at the moment, Melbourne is in a luxurious position where we can differentiate, and this is this fit-for-purpose concept. At the moment, we are in a luxurious position, and it is luxurious comparing us to Adelaide, where we can differentiate between the qualities of water that are available to us and be smarter about how we apply what's available or how we use what's available.
The other obvious answer is to wash less, because we wash far too much. I think my father, my late father, would do an APC, armpits and crutch, a basin of water and a flannel. Yes, I mean, he would also shower.
As you just pointed out, he is your late father.
Move this way.
He lived a long and healthy life, and he certainly didn't die from not washing. I mean, I can't see it taking on, but in my view, we are a bit obsessive. I mean, hygiene is damaging us at the moment as much as it's certainly in terms of, spraying chemicals everywhere and all the rest of it. But that's my own hobby horse, and I shouldn't talk so much. More questions, please. Yes, there's one up there. Yep. No, take the one first and then the next one. Yeah.
It would seem that most of the speakers are accepting of the fact that as a species we need to accept that we're part of nature, not masters of it. And I'm wondering to what extent you think the current climate change crisis, in which our greenhouse gas emissions are affecting the climate of the planet, are perhaps the most dramatic evidence, a wake-up call for that change of perception.
Yes, definitely. We know humans have become a geological agent on the planet. There's some scientists have given a new name to this era, the Anthropocene, an era in which humans have become a major geological force on the planet, and we have entered a new era. I think this is a huge challenge, and it makes us. When I was growing up, the Industrial Revolution was a fairly uncomplicated story of progress and growth. It throws into relief this last 200 years in a whole new disturbing way, and it indeed challenges to the very core how we see ourselves in nature.
And it does challenge us to quite personally consider, can we do with less? Are we prepared to compromise on our lifestyle? Because essentially, looking in the not too distant future, westernised societies cannot continue to consume and live the lifestyles that we are living, or else it's a very sort of finite end that we're looking towards for the planet. So.
But Michael, is this where engineering comes back? I mean, you spoke in praise of engineering, and I think we're going to need some engineering solutions, because telling everyone to wash less obviously isn't going to wash from the reaction I received.
I wasn't speaking in praise of big engineering. No, I was speaking in praise of the idea that we need to, manage nature. We can't. It shouldn't be a debate between engineering on the one hand and the environment on the other.
I guess I was thinking in terms of ingenuity, ingenious engineering, technical advances.
Absolutely. I'm 100% think that's the case. Yes, and that. Look, I think the great challenge is this. We've just been through this global economic crisis. Well, we're in it. I mean, the Americans are still in it. And if they're in it, I guess we're still in it, even if we can't see that we are. Now, the way to get out of the global economic crisis is apparently we need to spend our way out. We all need to consume more. But the climate and the planet are crying out for us to actually consume less. So there is a mismatch between the kind of economic systems and ideologies that we regard as natural and the planet and the systems in the planet that we regard as natural. And we're in danger of thinking that the mechanisms of the market are more natural than nature itself. We've got to make a very fundamental choice here. And really the global economic crisis is part of the same phenomenon as global warming. They're all about excessive consumption funded by debt, whether it's carbon debt or money debt. So the solution for both these problems is the same, and we're just not having that conversation.
And when Michael talking about engineering solutions, I think he's referring to some of the solutions that have been presented. If we take a step back and actually talk about engineers, they're supposed to be problem solvers. So they've got some pretty big problems that they can put their heads towards at the moment. And if we're not liking the solutions that they're coming up with, we just need to say, try again.
Well, we also are getting, of course, market solutions. The proposed emissions trading scheme is a market solution, but shock horror, it might close down a brown coal power station. And we can't have that or put up the price of electricity. And actually I thought that the point of a price mechanism in the market was to change behaviours through price signals, but obviously. Anyway, question now over here, please.
Now, speaking of electricity, Marnie, could you tell us the reasons that the government gave for rejecting that proposal to take the water from the recycling plant up to the cooling towers and release that water, that drinking water for us? I've never understood why they didn't accept that.
No, that's a really good question, because I haven't understood that either. It was all over the papers we were going to do that, take the water from the Eastern Treatment, cool the power stations with it, and suddenly it disappeared. What happened?
Was my presentation too subtle? I thought it was very unsubtle. It's not been explained. And I was actually quite intimately involved with the Central Region Sustainable Water Strategy. It was on the table, and somewhere between October 2006 and June 2007, some significant decisions were made, and how those decisions were made is not in the public arena.
This desal plant just materialised.
Kind of did.
It's bizarre.
Okay, we have another question over here, thanks. Yeah. And then one up the back next, yeah.
Thank you for your excellent talks, all of you. My question is that, well, I'm not sure that it's a question. I have trouble conceptualising.
Put the microphone a bit closer to your mouth.
Conceptualising how you put such large volumes of water back into people's houses when the plumbing is already in existence. You hear a lot about sustainable building of new housing estates, but what about the places that already exist? You know, is there some idea that they'll dig up the ground and put a whole lot of new pipes in?
Look, retrofitting is the trendy term for that, is more difficult than going out and setting it up from, day one in a new housing development. There's no question about that. If I give you a little case study, I live in Richmond. You can't swing a cat on the block that I'm on. I refer to my house as a caravan without wheels. I'm in the process of looking at renovating. I'm going to have an inside toilet. I'm pretty excited about that. But what I've done in considering that renovation is I've managed on the tiniest block that you can possibly imagine. I've put a water tank, a bladder water tank under my floor, and I've incorporated in an on-site water recycling system with an underground tank that's its reservoir that I will use to supply recycled water into my toilet and into my washing machine. I'll be collecting rainwater that will be used in the showers, and I do have long showers, sorry. When the water out of the rainwater tank is all used up, it is then augmented through the potable supply system, and the normal plumbing applies into the kitchen. So it's a site-specific thing, but if I can do it on a block that is seriously no bigger than what we're on up here, it can be done anywhere.
What kind of capital cost are you looking at? In terms of a proportion of your budget?
Look, it's quite expensive, but I felt that knowing about recycled water and being in the recycling industry, I needed to show some leadership. And so, look, off the top of my head, the water recycling on-site system is nominally about $10,000. And it's the same investment as when you're talking about your rainwater tank. Economically, probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but principle, I have a real issue about flushing my toilet with potable quality water. And look, if I can, go without a few things to demonstrate a point, then I'm prepared to do that.
Okay, question up the back, thanks.
This is for Tom to comment on. If I have a heart attack out in the bush, I can take advantage of the infrastructure and technology that means I can be transported to a medical facility and treated using the latest medical technology, the result of medical research. And this is because of the enormous resources that have gone into developing medical infrastructure, emergency transport, hospitals, professional doctors, and the enormous resources that have gone into medical research. Just because the system of medical care can't deal with every possible medical emergency, does that mean that we should give up trying to make it the best we can? So to bushfires. I submit that we have only the most rudimentary infrastructure and technology to deal with bushfires, which is why it does not seem anachronistic for Tom to compare the experiences of the 1939 bushfires, of 2009 bushfires with those in 1939.
Tom.
Yes, thank you for that comment. I was struck by how quickly the 2009 bushfire disabled our modern communications and technology systems. It's very humbling, isn't it? And suddenly the 70-year gap between those fires seemed to collapse. In what I'm saying about the fires, I'm very much emphasising at this time the power of nature and our need to come to terms with that. But I wouldn't hesitate to say that we need to go on improving, of course, our prevention and suppression systems. We still have a lot to learn when there's a great deal that can be done there. But one of the initiatives I think would be very beneficial is to recall from 1939 how many people saved lives by going underground, going into dugouts, fire refuges. And it's a last resort, but there are all kinds of pressures, personal, financial and so forth, that will encourage people to stay and defend, and if they do so and they have a dugout on their property they can retreat to at the last moment, they have a chance of surviving. And it's true that in 1939 dugouts did save dozens and dozens of lives. If they hadn't been there, the death toll would have been much more like Black Saturday 2009. There's a challenge to the design and construction industries of the fire continent. Build us a secure, safe, cheap fire refuge that can be there on every property, not down the end of the street where people will die getting to it, but on every property to ensure that in the last resort situation people can survive.
The other position, Tom, is to say people just shouldn't be living there.
Yes. Or they should only be allowed to live there if they have such a refuge. I mean, there's an in-between position too, that to actually say these refuges are not an option, these are mandatory as part of the planning approvals for building in these areas.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have historically resisted those kind of mandatory pressures, haven't we? One of the reasons the stay and defend or leave early policy has been popular and current is that it's libertarian, it encourages people to make an informed decision, and many people will want to stay with their homes, and people will want to live in that environment. I want them to live in that environment too, and I think we have to help them to do that as safely as we can. So I much prefer to look at the issue and say, well, people are rebuilding there now, how can we help them to rebuild safely, and what kind of community results from a situation where you're rebuilding a home knowing it may well be incinerated in the next generation.
You see, I read your work with joy and delight, as you know, but I'm left with the conclusion that these fires are vast and inevitable and unfightable. And I ask myself, I'm not making a pronouncement about this, I'm just thinking aloud, I wonder whether the forest doesn't belong to the fire in the way that the catchment belongs to the water, and perhaps we shouldn't be there.
Well, yeah, I like the argument because I think part of what we're talking about here is ecological specificity, both with regard to water and fire. I mean, we're hearing arguments about the water solutions in Melbourne, in Victoria, have to be distinct because of the closed catchment policy. The fire response here has to be distinct because this isn't just any forest, it's a very particular forest with a very particular fire ecology. And I think that Aboriginal people who used and managed the Australian landscape, virtually every stitch of it for tens of thousands of years, I think they didn't live in the heart of the wet mountain forests, partly because they weren't resource rich, but also because in high summer they were dangerous places. And I think that there will be, as we learn gradually to belong, there will be a reluctance to live in these really dangerous places. But that's going to be a long learning curve, isn't it? It's going to be a very long one.
Tom, do you know that if in sort of local government information when you're purchasing a property, if there's information provided to people about you're potentially moving into a bushfire hazardous region, same as if you bought property in a landslip zone or a flood zone? Is there bushfire recognition in planning schemes?
I don't believe so, but I stand corrected on that. I think and the flood example is interesting. You know, we don't build on flood-prone land. We've learnt that, but we do continually rebuild where fire goes, and fire goes where it's gone before.
I can feel my position hardening on this topic.
That's right. Good, we're getting somewhere. This is a conversation.
If you look at the current debates in New South Wales around coastal planning, where some shires have attempted to say to people, no, you can't build that close to the coast because the coastline moves and your land will be eroded. And if you do choose to build there, then it's at your own risk. And those people with those $1 million properties have now succeeded in convincing the state government to say, no, you need to do remedial works to protect that land, rather than accept the fact that the coastline moves. So these debates occur, with flooding, with fires, with erosion and so on. We have time for one more question, I think, at the back here. Yes, at the very back.
Is that me? Can you hear?
Yes.
Well, my interest is really about the amount of water that goes down the loo. I just think we haven't really focused nearly enough on that. Only this morning I had a conversation with the mother of a very passionate young man who's just travelled the world developing waterless toilets. And at all the festivals, apparently, this is what they do now. And whilst it was very technical, it sounds like, I've got enough room under my house to set up a waterless loo for almost very little cost at all. And do you know much about that, is my question? And is it being promoted?
Okay, so the question is about waterless toilets, composting toilets and other forms of toilet that don't involve us flushing lots of water down the loo and wasting it.
I know a little bit. I'll share the little bit that I do know. So yes, the technology is there, it's utilised, particularly Gippsland coastal region, composting toilets everywhere. I do believe that Yarra Valley Water has looked at potentially these systems where they have sewage systems that are incredibly expensive to run because of the undulations. It gets more expensive if you have to pump sewage, obviously, than if it's going to run like gravity. The point that I'd like to make in relation to having that type of technology being adopted is a little along the lines of the point that I was making about 10 years ago when some municipalities told you it was illegal to have rainwater tanks. This is where we've got to really challenge and push the boundaries. If it's a good idea, then if enough of us are knocking on the door saying, I want to have this in my house or I want to run this on my property, we force change. There's now the water recycling system that I've put on order has only very recently been approved by EPA Victoria because the demand was there. People want to have these options. So if you continually knock on the door, I mean, there's going to be a few no's to start off with, but this is where we as consumers can influence policy change. If we want it and demand it and make enough, jump up and down about it enough, we drag the policy along to where it should be.
I'd like to thank the City of Melbourne and Melbourne Conversations, the free program of public forums and discussions, and Future Leaders, the two organisers of this event, particularly Jeffrey Taylor from the City of Melbourne and Helen Sykes from Future Leaders. Thanks too to Readings. Well deserved. Thanks too to Readings, who have copies of those books, Michael's book and others up the back, and also to Federation Square Management for making the venue available. And please, let's finish by thanking our three speakers. Thank you.